Alright, let's meet one of the most distinct poetic voices of the Victorian era, Christina Rossetti. Christina was born in London on the 5th of December 1830 into a highly creative Italian family. Her father, Gabriel Rossetti, was a poet and political exile, and her brother Dante Gabriel Rossetti would later become one of the founders of the Pre-Raphaelite Brotherhood, a major artistic movement that combined poetry and painting. Christina herself started writing poetry quite early. Her first verses appeared in 1842, published privately by her grandfather. Then, in 1850, she began publishing under the pseudonym Ellen Alleyne, contributing 7 poems to the Germ, the Pre-Raphaelite journal. That's a fact that's been asked in exam. 7 poems and the Germ are key details to remember. Rossetti became known for her ballads, mystical themes, and religious lyrics, blending beauty with deep moral introspection. Her breakthrough came with her collection Goblin Market and Other Poems in 1862, illustrated by her brother Dante Gabriel. This book established her as one of the leading poets of the age, and yes, both the title and the year have been asked in exam. A few years later, she published The Princess Progress and Other Poems in 1866, followed by her lovely children's book Sing Song in 1872. Her health, however, began to decline in the 1880s because of Graves' disease, though she continued to write. Her later works include A Pageant and Other Poems in 1881 and several volumes of religious prose such as Seek and Find. 1879, Call to be Saints, 1881, and The Face of the Deep, 1892. Each of these has appeared in exam references at different times, so they're worth noting. Sadly, Rossetti developed cancer in her later years and died on the 29th of December 1894. Her collected works were later edited by her brother William Michael Rossetti in 1904. So, in short, Christina Rossetti's poetry stands out for its fusion of beauty, faith, and emotional depth. Whether she is writing about temptation, redemption, or female strength, her tone always feels both spiritual and deeply human. Now, let's look closely at her most famous poem, Goblin Market. Rossetti wrote it in April 1859, and it was published in 1862 in her collection Goblin Market and Other Poems. The poem is richly symbolic and filled with moral undertones, and yes, both the title and the year have been asked in exam. The story centers on 2 sisters, Laura and Lizzie, who live alone and fetch water daily by a stream. One evening, they hear the calls of goblin merchants selling strange, tempting fruits. Come buy, come buy. These goblins are not human. They look like a mix of animals with faces like cats, rats, and even wombats. Curious, Laura lingers behind and trades a lock of her hair for their fruit. That act, giving her hair, becomes the poem's symbol of temptation and loss. She eats greedily and returns home dazed, ignoring her sister's warning. Lizzie reminds her of Jeannie, a girl who once tasted the goblin fruit and died. That's an important reference asked in exam. Soon, Laura realizes she can no longer hear the goblin's cries. She becomes sickly, weak, and obsessed, wasting away without the fruit. She plants a seed, hoping to grow more fruit, but nothing happens. Finally, Lizzie decides to save her sister. She bravely goes to the goblins with silver coins, trying to buy fruit, but they refuse her money and attack her, smearing her with fruit pulp. Lizzie doesn't eat or swallow the fruit she resists. She runs home, covered in juice, and tells Laura to eat me, drink me, love me, meaning taste the juice from her face to break the spell. Laura does, suffers a terrible convulsion, but wakes the next morning miraculously healed. In the end, the sisters survive, grow up, and share their story with their children, warning them about the dangers of temptation and celebrating the strength of sisterly love. That moral, the bond between women, love as salvation, has been asked in exam as the poem's key theme. It's worth noting that the poem was illustrated by Dante Gabriel Rossetti, which is another exam favorite. Now, Critics have long debated what Goblin Market means. Is it a Christian allegory, a feminist parable, or a story about economic temptation? Rossetti herself said it wasn't written for children, even though it sounds like a fairy tale. Whatever the interpretation, Goblin Market remains a masterpiece of musical language, vivid imagery, and moral depth. A poem that feels both innocent and unsettling at the same time. Alright, let's step into the mid-19th century, the year 1848 to be precise. Picture a group of young British artists, all under 25, sitting in a London studio plotting a quiet revolution in art. They call themselves the Pre-Raphaelite Brotherhood. Now, why Pre-Raphaelite? Well, they were reacting against the Royal Academy's dull, formulaic style, a style that they felt had lost its imagination. They believed that ever since Raphael, painters had been imitating artificial ideals instead of painting life honestly. So they wanted to go back before Raphael to the simplicity, sincerity, and detail of 14th and 15th century Italian art. That rejection of Royal Academy painting and admiration for early Italian masters have both been asked in exam. The Brotherhood was officially formed in 1848, and its founding trio, all art students at the Royal Academy, were Dante Gabriel Rossetti, William Holman Hunt, and John Everett Miller. All three names and their age group under 25 are favorites in exam questions. Soon, the circle expanded. They invited the painter James Collinson, the critic F.G. Stephens, the sculptor Thomas Woolner, and Rossetti's brother William Michael Rossetti, who served as their chronicler and critic. Mentors like Ford Madox Brown and William Dyce also guided them, though they weren't official members. Their movement only lasted about 5 years, but the impact was lasting. It changed British painting forever, inspiring not only visual art, but also literature and the decorative arts. Their works combined moral seriousness with intense natural detail, and they often drew inspiration from poetry, especially medieval romance, nature, and religion. Now, speaking of poetry, one of the founders, Dante Gabriel Rossetti, was not only a painter but also a gifted poet. His literary work, along with that of William Morris and Algernon Charles Swinburne, led to what became known as the fleshly school of poetry, a phrase that might sound shocking, and for good reason. The term fleshly school was actually coined by Robert Buchanan, who attacked these poets in an essay titled The Fleshly School of Poetry, published in the Contemporary Review in October 1871. Another important exam fact. Buchanan accused them of immorality and sensual excess, claiming that their poetry was obsessed with the physical rather than the spiritual. He later expanded the essay into a pamphlet in 1872, but eventually withdrew it. Rossetti didn't stay silent. He responded in The Stealthy School of Criticism, published in the Athenaeum, while Swinburne fired back with Under the Microscope in the same year, 1872. Those two responses, Rossetti's Stealthy School and Swinburne's Under the Microscope, have both been asked in exam. In truth, what Buchanan called fleshly, the Pre-Raphaelites saw as deeply human, a fusion of body and soul, earth and spirit. Their art and poetry sought to restore passion and beauty to an age that had become mechanical and moralistic. So, to wrap up, Pre-Raphaelite Brotherhood, founded in 1848 by Rossetti, Hunt, and Millais, opposed artificial academic art and turned to medieval sincerity. The fleshly school of poetry, labeled by Buchanan in 1871, included Rossetti, Morris, and Swinburne, who defended their art as sincere rather than sinful. Together, they marked a shift toward aestheticism, symbolism, and emotional truth, paving the way for writers like Oscar Wilde and the later Victorian poets. Alright, let's travel into the world of the Pre-Raphaelites, where art, poetry, and beauty came together in one remarkable movement. And right at its heart stands Dante Gabriel Rossetti, poet, painter, and dreamer. Rossetti was born in 1828, and if you ever see his name in exam questions, remember this key detail. He founded the Pre-Raphaelite Brotherhood in 1848 with William Holman Hunt and John Everett Millais. That founding year has been asked in exam more than once. So, what were the Pre-Raphaelites all about? They wanted to go back to the purity before Raphael, before Renaissance art became too idealized. They looked to medieval subjects, rich colors, natural beauty, and emotional sincerity. Rossetti's art, in particular, is known for its sensuality and medieval revivalism, a kind of spiritual passion wrapped in visual beauty. Rossetti's work was influenced by John Keats and William Blake, two poets who also mixed art and vision. Later, his collection, The House of Life, combined intense emotion with philosophical reflection. He believed painting and poetry were two sides of the same art. His canvases often carried verses, and his poems often inspired his painting. Two famous works are worth remembering. The Girlhood of Mary Virgin, 1849, his first exhibited painting, and Astarte Syriaca, 1877. Both appear in exam lists regularly. But the most famous of all is The Blessed Damozel, his masterpiece in both verse and paint. First published in the Germ Journal in 1850, that fact has been asked in exam, so do note it. The poem reimagines grief as a kind of heavenly longing inspired by Edgar Allan Poe's The Raven, but in reverse. Instead of a man mourning a lost woman on earth, Rossetti shows a woman, the damozel, looking down from heaven, yearning to be reunited with her lover below. The image is tender, spiritual, and deeply romantic. Even the painting's frame carries 4 stanzas from the poem. That's how closely Rossetti intertwined word and image. His sister, Christina Rossetti, was also a poet. He even illustrated her Goblin Market. And his personal life, especially his muse and later wife, Elizabeth Siddal, deeply colored his art, both literally and emotionally. Now, Rossetti's influence reached far beyond painting. He inspired a second generation of artists, William Morris and Edward Burne-Jones, who carried forward his ideals into what became the aesthetic and arts and crafts movements. Both those connections have been asked in exam. And that brings us to William Morris, born in 1834, another key figure to remember. Morris was a designer, craftsman, poet, and social thinker, in short, a one-man renaissance. He was deeply involved in the arts and crafts movement, which celebrated handmade beauty over industrial mass production. That link has been repeatedly asked in exam. Morris revived medieval craft techniques in British textiles, wallpapers, and furniture, but he was also a powerful writer. His great epic poem, The Earthly Paradise, 1868-70, retold classical and medieval tales in gorgeous verse. Later in life, Morris became politically active. He embraced socialism and utopian ideals, founding the Socialist League in 1884 and setting up the Kelmscott Press in 1891 to print illuminated books. Think of them as a modern revival of medieval manuscript art. Both those years are worth remembering for example. And then comes his most visionary work, News from Nowhere, 1890. It's a utopian novel that blends socialism and soft science fiction. It first appeared serially in Commonweal magazine, another exam point. The story follows William Guest, who wakes up in a future England transformed into a peaceful, classless society. There's no private property, no money, no prisons, just people living harmoniously, finding joy in work and beauty in nature. It's Morris's dream of a humane, artistic socialism. Morris's influence went far beyond his lifetime. He inspired modern fantasy literature, influenced Tolkien, and helped shape ideas of beauty that still live in design and poetry today. By the time he died in 1896, William Morris had done it all: poet, artist, socialist, printer, and dreamer of better worlds. His works, his designs, even the William Morris Society, founded in 1955, continue to honor that legacy.